Hi students,
Welcome to lesson number 42.
on the modern sociological theories, phenomenology and ethnomethodology as given by Edmund Husserl and Harold Garfinkel. Now the introduction to the topic. Sociology, as we all know, is a study of social actions or social behavior, and phenomenology is concerned with the way the social world is actually experienced, and Edmund Husserl and 𝗪𝗏 Coates are associated with this popular or particular tradition of interpretative sociology. The phenomenologist begins with the statement that human beings are social beings having consciousness, mind, and thus thoughts, beliefs, values, and there are, unlike any scientific matter which responds to external stimuli without having any conscience. Hence, any response from any human includes his subjective meanings being attached to the behavior. According to the phenomenological perspective, it is impossible to understand these subjective meanings which could be approached only through intuition and interpretation. Hence, sociological methods are different from science and it is an interpretive discipline. Max Weber added weight to the perspective. He stated that explanation of social action should begin with observation and theoretical interpretation of subjective state of minds of actors, and for any understanding a sociologist must step into the shoes of the others. Ethnomethodology is an approach within sociology that focuses on the way people as rational actors make sense of their everyday world by employing practical reasoning rather than formal logic. It is a recent development in sociology. Its existence as a publicly identified approach dates only from the publication of Harold Garfinkel's study in ethnomethodology in 1967. Ethnomethodology is concerned with taken for granted aspects of the social world. It concentrates on how people make sense of the everyday aspects of their world and how they make their social environment accountable to themselves. Social actors adopt different roles and different frameworks of meaning in different situations, and in so doing construct a variety of rationalities for different situations. Ethnomethods argue that in order to understand the actor's conception of objects and events, the sociologist must examine the routine practical activities of everyday life. Ethnomethodology has attracted considerable attention and criticism within sociology. The impact of ethnomethodology has stemmed from the radical nature of its ideas. The ideas of ethnomethodology are in a general similar to those of the symbolic interactionist. Thus, phenomenologist refutes the scientific or positivist approach to sociology and presents its interpretative aspects, and ethnomethodologist draws from and extends the concerns of interactionists and the phenomenological projects and bracket or suspend their own common sense assumptions to study how common sense is used in everyday life. Now, the objectives of the study. It tries to explain the meaning of phenomenological and ethnomethodological theories. It also provides the fundamental difference between these two theories. It also lets know the historical roots of the theories and provide a detailed discrimination of the proponents of the theories and their respective works. Now, we will try to understand what is phenomenology and its meaning. Phenomenology is derived from the Greek word that is phenomenon, that which appears, and logos, which means study, is the philosophical study of the structures of subjective experience and consciousness. As a philosophical movement, it was founded in the early years of the 20th century by Edmund Husserl, who was later expanded upon by a circle of his followers at the universities of Göttingen and Munich in Germany. It then spread to France, the United States, and elsewhere, often in contexts far removed from Husserl's early work. Phenomenology is normally understood in either of two ways: as a disciplinary field in philosophy or as a movement in the history of philosophy. At the outset, phenomenology may be defined as a study of structures of experience or consciousness. Literally, phenomenology is a study of phenomena, appearance of things or things as they appear in our experience or the ways we experience things, thus the meanings things have in our experience. Phenomenology studies conscious knowledge as experience from the subjective or person's point of view. This field of philosophy is then to be made distinct from and related to the other key fields of philosophy, like ontology, the study of being; epistemology, the study of knowledge; logic, the study of valid reasoning; ethics, the study of right and wrong, etc. Phenomenologically, inspection of a known type of experience will mark the ways in which we ourselves would experience that form of conscious action. And the most important assets of our familiar types of experience is their intentionality, there being a consciousness of or about something, something experienced or presented or engaged in a certain way. How I see or conceptualize or understand the object I am dealing with defines the meaning of that object in my current experience. Thus, phenomenology features a study of meaning in a wide sense that includes more than what is expressed in language. Phenomenology, hence, is chiefly concerned with regular manifestation on and study of the structures of consciousness and the phenomena that appears in acts of consciousness. This can be clearly differentiated from other methods of analysis which sees the world as objects, set of objects and objects acting and reacting upon one another. Now, we will understand the contributions of Edmund Husserl. Phenomenology is a 20th century philosophical way of thinking about the nature of reality, which has influenced sociology. The German philosopher Edmund Husserl is closely linked with phenomenology. Phenomenology argues that the only phenomena that we can be sure of is that we are consciously thinking beings. Therefore, we should study any phenomena around us in terms of the way we consciously experience them. Phenomenology has been practiced with or without the name since quite many years from now. For instance, the Hindu and Buddhist philosophers who reflected on states of consciousness through pensive states were practicing phenomenology. When Descartes, Hume and Kant characterized states of perception, thought and imagination, they were practicing phenomenology. When Brentano categorized varieties of mental phenomena defined by directness of consciousness, he was practicing phenomenology. When William James appraised kinds of mental activity in the stream of consciousness, including their embodiment and their dependence on habit, he too was practicing phenomenology. Still, the discipline of phenomenology, its roots tracing back to the centuries, came to a fully fleshed status by Husserl. Husserl's work was followed by an outbreak of phenomenological writings in the first half of the 20th century, and the multiplicity of conventional phenomenology is evident in the Encyclopedia of Phenomenology, which features different articles on nearly 7 types of phenomenology. The first type of phenomenology is transcendental constitutive phenomenology. That is, it studies how objects are constituted in pure or transcendental consciousness, setting aside questions of any relation to the natural world around us. The second type is the naturalistic constitutive phenomenology. It studies how consciousness constitutes or takes things in the world of nature, assuming with a natural attitude that consciousness is part of nature. Third, it is existential phenomenology. It studies concrete human existence, including our experience of free choice or actions in concrete situation. Fourth, it is generative historicist phenomenology. It studies how meaning as found in our experience is generated in historical process of collective experience over time. Fifth type, it is genetic phenomenology. It studies the genesis of meaning of things within one's own stream of experience. Sixth, it is hermeneutical phenomenology. It studies interpretative structures of experience, how we understand and engage things around us in our human world, including ourselves and others. And the seventh type, it is realistic phenomenology. It studies the structure of consciousness and intentionality, assuming it occurs in a real world that is largely external to consciousness and not somehow brought into being by consciousness. In his book Logical Investigation, Husserl delineated a composite system of philosophy, moving from logic to philosophy of language to ontology, that is the theory of universals and parts of worlds, to a phenomenological theory of intentionality, and finally to a phenomenological theory of knowledge. Then in ideas, he focused exactly on phenomenology itself. Husserl defined phenomenology as a science of the essence of consciousness centered on the defining trait of intentionality, approached explicitly in the first person. Thus, phenomenology is a study of consciousness, that is, conscious experience of diverse kinds as experienced from the first person standpoint. In this discipline, different forms of experience are studied just as they are experienced from the outlook of the subject existing through or performing them. Thus, human beings typify experience of seeing, hearing, imagining, thinking, feeling, wishing, desiring, willing, and also acting, that is, embodied activities of walking, talking, cooking, carpentering, etc. However, not just any categorizing of any experience will do. Ethnomethodology and its meaning. Ethnomethodology means the study of the methods used by people. It is concerned while examining the methods and procedures employed by members of society to construct, account for, and give meaning to their social world. Ethnomethodologists draw heavily on the European tradition of phenomenological philosophy and in particularly acknowledge a depth to the ideas of the philosophers, sociologist Älvsberg Schutz. Many ethnomethodologists begin with the assumption that society exists only in so far as members perceive its existence. With this emphasis on members' view of social reality, ethnomethodology is generally regarded as phenomenological approach. Ethnomethodology is a developing perspective which contains a diversity of viewpoints. One of the major concerns of sociology is the explanation of social order. From the results of numerous investigations, it appears that social life is ordered and regular, and that social action is systematic and patterned. Typically, the sociologist has assumed that social order has an objective reality. Ethnomethodologists either suspend or abandon the belief that an actual or objective social order exists. Instead, they proceed from the assumption that social life appears orderly to members of society. Thus, in the eyes of members, their everyday activities seem ordered and systematic. But this order is not necessarily due to the intrinsic nature or inherent qualities of the social world. In other words, it may not actually exist. Rather, it may simply appear to exist because of the way members perceive and interpret social reality. Social order therefore becomes a convenient fiction, an appearance of order constructed by members of society. This appearance allows the social world to be described and explained, and so made knowable, reasonable, understandable, and accountable to its member. Ethnomethodology is concerned with how members of society go about the task of seeing, describing and explaining order in the world in which they live. Now, we will discuss the contribution of Harold Garfinkel to ethnomethodology. Ethnomethodology as a sociological perspective was founded by American sociologist Harold Garfinkel in early 1960s. The main idea behind it are set out in his book Studies in Ethnomethodology. It differs from the sociological perspective in the way that which all the perspectives presuppose that social world is orderly, ethnomethodology out with the assumption that social order is illusory. For them, social order is constructed in the minds of social actors, as society confront the individual as a series of sense, impressions and experiences which she or he must somehow organize in a coherent pattern. According to Garfinkel, the central claim of ethnomethodology is that phenomena of order are identical with the procedures for their local endogenous production and accountability. By ethnomethods, Garfinkel implies the methods or means used by individuals in interaction to generate a shared and significant meaning. Ethnomethodology then is a study of these ethnomethods. Garfinkel coined the term ethnomethodology as a manner to explain how people use different methods in order to understand the society they live in. Garfinkel noticed through his study of ethnomethodology that the methods people use to understand the society they live in are very much rooted in people's natural attitudes. Like symbolic interactionism, ethnomethodology provides a broad theoretic structure for discovering the social world. But again, like symbolic interactionism, it does not have foretelling schemes in the way the micro-level theory does. However, ethnomethodology approaches interactions in a different manner. It seeks to form an exacting science out of small-scale details that symbolic interactionism would tend to view as less significant. Garfinkel viewed that ethnomethodology is a theoretical approach premised upon the belief that human interaction is always carried out within an accord without which no interaction can take place. This harmony or consensus is a fraction of what grasps society together and is created of the norms for behavior that people hold around them. It is hence often presumed that people in society share similar norms and expectations of behavior. Therefore, by infringing these norms, ethnomethodologists can study more about that society and how they respond to broken normal social behavior. The point of argument of the ethnomethodologists is that many people are not conscious about the norms they follow. It is this sense of ignorance that deters them from explaining what norms they actually follows. It is hence the responsibility of ethnomethodologists to expose those norms and behaviors. Quite often, the ethnomethodologists employ creative methodologies to unravel the prevalent social norms by postulating smart ways to interrupt normal social interaction. In a famous series of ethnomethodology experiments, college students were asked to pretend that they were guests in their own home without telling their families what they are doing. They were instructed to be polite, impersonal, use terms of formal addresses like Mr. and Mrs. and to only speak after being spoken to. When the experiment was over, several students reported that their families treated the episode as a joke. One family thought their daughter was being extra nice because she wanted something, while others believed their son was hiding something serious. Other parents reacted with anger, shock and bewilderment, accusing the children of being impolite, mean and inconsiderate. This experiment allowed the students to see that even the informal norms that govern our behavior inside our homes are carefully structured. By violating the norms of the household, the norms become clearly visible. Hence, breaching has various propositions. That is, first it shows just how habituated we are in regard to certain kinds of interaction unfolding in certain kinds of ways. Yet, we concurrently are considerate to the developing sense of the interaction. Garfinkel pointed out that ethnomethodologically, research teaches us that society behaves as if there were no other way to do so. Usually, people go along with what is expected of them, and the existence of norms only becomes evident when they are violated. What is indexicality? Indexicality points out to the ways in which a specific word or description has a particular connotations for the speaker, who in turn supposes it also has a specific meaning for the listener. In reality, these meanings may or may not be analogous, but if the two parties engage in a conversation, some sort of meaning will appear from it. Even if it is nothing more than that the two participants do not comprehend each other, but usually we enter into conversation with others assuming that we have a shared or common understanding. Furthermore, indexicality proposes that even where there is shared meaning, individual meanings might still come out and assist in shaping the emergent meaning. For example, perhaps the American flag has a similar meaning for two people, but if one had a son or daughter who died in battle, the meaning might be somewhat different for this individual, and this difference might divulge itself in conversation. Garfinkel regarded indexical expression like here, now and me as key terms, as they alter their meaning depending on when and where they are used. Such terms are referred as indexicals as they indicate the situational context in which they are produced. Garfinkel contributed that such expressions go beyond here, now, etc., and include any and all utterance that members of society produce. Garfinkel viewed that speech tends to be basically non-objective in real experience in spite of the likelihood for shared objective meaning. Now, we will understand what is reflexivity. As Garfinkel specified that pervasiveness of indexical expressions imply that all forms of action provide for their own understandability to the methods by which they are produced, that is, action has a property of reflexivity, whereby such action is made meaningful in the light of the very situation within which it is produced. He, however, furthered that the contextual setting ought not to be considered as a passive background for the action. Reflexivity essentially implies that members figure action in relation to context, while the context itself is constantly being redefined through action. The early insight into the significance of reflexivity occurred during the study of jurors' deliberations, wherein what jurors had decided was used by them to reflexively organize the plausibility of what they were deciding. Other investigation discovered that parties did not always know what they meant by their own formulations. Rather, verbal formulations of the local order of an event were used to gather the very meaning that gave them their logical sense. Garfinkel affirmed that the issue of how practical actions are tied to their context lies at the heart of ethnomethodological inquiry. Quite often, Garfinkel has exemplified ethnomethodological analysis through illustrating service lines. It is common fact to stand in a line for cues or an integral part of our everyday social life within which all participate to carry out daily codes. In other words, line may seem impromptu and routine, but they exhibit an internal member produced embodied structure. A line is witnessably a produced social object. It is, in Durkheimian terms, a social fact. Participants' actions are seeably what they are, such as occupying a position in a queue, rely upon practices that the participants engage in relation to others, practices in the closed environs. To be familiar with someone as in a line or to be seen as in line ourselves requires consideration to bodily movement and bodily placement in relation to others and to the physical environment that those movements also comprise. This is another sense that we consider the action to be indexical. It is made significant in the ways in which it is attached to the situation and the practices of members who create it. The ethnomethodologist's job is to scrutinize how members' ongoing behavior is a component aspect of this or that course of action. Such analysis can be applied to any sort of social matter. Example, being female, following instructions, performing a proof, participating in a conversation. These topics were used to delegate all kinds of inquiry that ethnomethodology was proposed to embark on. The research methods generated by ethnomethodology are inseparable from the theoretic assertions about society, and tools such as tape or video recorder are crucial. The ethnomethodologist will play back the recorded interaction countless times to discover the surfacing of its social meaning. For at its core, ethnomethodology, similarly to phenomenology, sees the nature of society as indivisible from the skill to analyze it. An additional vital tool for the ethnomethodologist is a stopwatch which would help in interpretation of the length of the pauses people make between utterance. For example, consider someone pausing or saying while talking his or her wedding vows. The whole meaning of the ceremony might be tainted. In a similar sense, the term etc. is used as a kind of verbal shortcut, that is, people leave out details that they feel are irrelevant given who the audience is. For example, if you meet your best friend every Friday night for pizza, you might call him or her up and simply say, should we meet on Friday, and leave out the stress on eating pizza. The ethnomethodologist should listen to conversations frequently to collect the faint but significant presence of the etc. principle in conversation. 𝗪𝗵𝗪𝗀 work has been a major founding base of innumerable theorists, and researchers have contributed to the development of ethnomethodology and specific kinds of studies thereof. A key area of sociological study that has stemmed from ethnomethodology has been conversation analysis. It works from the position that the conversation is the essential form of interaction and essential to conversational analysis. It is the concept of turn taking. In other words, conversations are analyzed from the standpoint that the meaning of the conversation is formed around this belief of each speaker taking a turn. Conversation analysts will study in depth shifts of topic or tone, interruptions or other key moments on the basis of each people's turn to speak. Now, on conversation analysis. It is found linked to ethnomethodology by a common interest in understanding the methodological construction of social action. Conversation analysis takes communication or talk in interaction as one of the fundamental ways that people co-construct or collaboratively produce social action and social lives. Conversation analysts have developed an empirical approach to study talk in interaction in a lot of social domains. Forms of ethnomethodology such as conversational analysis have been engaged to view how diverse kinds of settings reinforce or create different kinds of meanings. Studies of institutional settings have been made to see how social actors in a variety of professional or service contexts divulge how the participant form and reinforce certain social practices. Perhaps even more specifically than symbolic interactionists, the ethnomethodologists explored how conditions such as social inequality are maintained through interactions. Finally, ethnomethodology often concerns itself with the notion of doing or accomplishing a certain kind of social role. For example, studies have been done on accomplishing gender, how certain ways of appearing or speaking make one socially defined as man or a woman. The issues generated by ethnomethodology are far less abstract in nature than in other forms of sociology. For the ethnomethodologists, things like turn taking or mediating conflicts or generating applause are the very substance of society, for they feel that only by uncovering the ethnomethods of society can we truly understand it. Ethnomethodologists are critical of traditional sociology. They believe that traditional sociologists simply engage in so much reflexivity, redefining the very acts they were trying to learn the truth about. Thus, when other sociologists would say person X is subordinate to person Y, the ethnomethodology would say person X interrupted person Y's turn taking in the conversation. For ethnomethodologists, the everyday world of conversation is commendable as a topic within itself, and it is not just a reflection of a topic. Critics of ethnomethodology dispute that it concerns itself with relatively insignificant matters and not on bigger issues surrounding stratification, production of goods or bureaucracy. Even with methodology, there have been concerns raised as to the specificity of certain studies, without which much attempts to link the findings to larger social issues or even the phenomenological mental processes underlying the interaction. On equilibrium, while some support ethnomethodology, others do not. For some, it studies essential and important aspect about the life experience, but the opponents mark it as trivial and simple. Now, we will understand the common methods used by phenomenological and ethnomethodological studies. And the first method used by both are the participant observation. This involves researchers immersing him or herself in the daily lives and routines of those being studied. This often requires extensive work in the setting being studied. This is called field work. The observer adopts a phenomenological stance while doing observation. This is a position that questions the objectivity of lived experience in order to explain how the people being observed construct this experience together. Observing some aspect of social life and the communication between actors that construct that lived experience may also be accomplished by video recording the interaction between actors. This is a common data collection method used in conversation analysis. The another method is interviewing. Phenomenologists and ethnomethodologists may also learn about how a particular aspect of social life is constructed or perceived by people by speaking with informants or members of a particular social group. Talking with informants is called interviewing. Interviews vary in degree of formality, that is informal interview to semi-structured to structured interviews. The other method is collection of artifacts and text. Phenomenologists and ethnomethodologists may learn how social experience is organized and accomplished by meaning or examining how artifacts, example written protocols, charts, flow sheets, educational handouts or materials are used by members of a group in daily life. Phenomenologists and ethnomethodologists may also conduct small experiments designed to reveal our taken for granted assumptions regarding social life. Now, let us sum up the whole thing. Phenomenology, the study of phenomena, appearance of things or things as they appear in our experience or the ways we experience things. thus the meaning things have in our experience. Phenomenology studies conscious knowledge as experience from the subjective or first person's point of view. Social structure is the sum total of these typification and the chronic patterns of interaction established by means of them. As such, social structure is a necessary element of the reality of everyday life. Husserl's phenomenology maintains that it is a study of consciousness as experience from the first person standpoint. Garfinkel pointed out that ethnomethodological research teaches us that society behaves as if there were no other way to do so. Usually, people go along with what is expected of them, and the existence of norms only becomes evident when they are violated.